Hello and welcome to the World Soccer Talk podcast, your weekly dose of talking about watching soccer on TV, online and apps. Coming up on episode 32, we discuss the pros and cons of the video assistant referee system, our thoughts on the TV coverage of the Confederations Cup thus far, and our memories of a man who was a pioneer in US soccer who died this week. Plus, as always, we've got lots of feedback and questions from you, the listeners. My name is Christopher Harris, aka The Gaffer, and I'm joined today by Kartik Krishnaiyer. Kartik, how are you, sir?
I'm doing okay, Chris. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing great. For those listeners who noticed a difference with the audio last week, and also probably this week's show too, I'm on location. I'm in Wales on vacation, but I've still been watching as many matches as I can while I'm on holiday, while spending a lot of time with my relatives and catching up on my old haunting grounds. I'm actually right now recording this from my town where I grew up as a boy, Llandeilo in Wales, and it's been hot as hell all week. It's been in the 90s, but today's the first day of rain, so this feels like it's I'm back at home after about 30 odd years. So Kartik, let's dive right into what we've been watching, and I'll have you kick it off. I'll just kind of add a disclaimer. So I haven't watched a ton of matches this week, but I have been able to watch both a couple of the Confederations Cup games, and both from the ITV as well as Univision. Telemundo and FS1. So I have been able to watch both sides of the pond for a couple of matches, but I'll have you kick it off in terms of what you've been watching this week.
Yeah, I haven't been able to watch a whole lot either, just because there hasn't been a whole lot on. It's the off-season in Europe and in Liga MX, the leagues that we've probably watched the closest outside the United States. So big news, obviously, right after we recorded the pod last week was the Ronaldo speculation, and I was stunned to see it make the mainstream news here in the United States. It was on CNN. When they did their little short sports segment during their newscasts in the morning, U.S. time, which generally revolve around the latest gossip from American football or the NBA Finals, etc. It was about Ronaldo, and then when I was watching ESPN FC, it was the first thing on the lead. And when I was watching the U.S. Open golf tournament, which I watched all of last weekend on Fox. It was, the periods of time when that tournament was on FS1, it was the number one story glaring in people's faces, even on the ticker on FS1. So a reminder that while soccer is not necessarily a mainstream sport among American media, if it involves Cristiano or involves Lionel Messi, I think those two exceptions, it will penetrate and it will break through, which is maybe another talking point for MLS in Miami. I know we did that a couple weeks ago, but Cristiano comes to the United States, you can imagine the reaction. I ended up watching this past weekend more golf, the U.S. Open on Fox, and it's the only tournament all year Fox shows, PGA Tour event, than actual football. But it was important, Chris, because it was a reminder for me about how Fox presents sporting events. They were awful. If you compare them to the kind of coverage you get on CBS and NBC, the other two networks that cover golf extensively and have the major championships, CBS has the Masters and the PGA Championship, NBC has the Open, the British Open as it's known in the U.S., but the Open Championship and the Players Championship, which is the biggest regular tour event that's held in Jacksonville every year. So they have of the five big events, each of those two networks have two and two. Just a contrast in commentary style, graphics, music, outtakes, the hyping of certain events, the intro segments, the outro segments, all of that. It wasn't identical to the way Fox covers soccer, but it was similar in its differences to how NBC and CBS and the Golf Channel is a Comcast network, so its coverage kind of mirrors NBC's, cover the sport. And that's a similar situation as we have in soccer, where Fox's coverage, the outtakes, the intakes, the way they hype certain segments, the way they hype certain people, the production quality mirrors that of ESPN, or is different than that of ESPN and NBC in soccer, right? Dramatically different. And the thing I found is when I made comments on social media about about Fox's golf coverage. People who aren't necessarily soccer fans were agreeing with me about, this is terrible. This is setting golf back 20 years. We haven't had coverage like this since the 1990s. And it just is a reminder Fox does things differently. Now, maybe that caters to a certain audience. Maybe that there is a constituency for that. And golf snobs and soccer snobs don't like it. But they do things differently. And I can say the same thing about college football and college basketball when I've watched those sports. They present their presentation of those sports is very different than the way ESPN or NBC or CBS presents those sports. So
yeah, and it's something too. I think that it's inside Fox's DNA. So it's not just the soccer coverage, like you're saying right now, too, in terms of golf or whether it's NFL. But it's interesting too because Fox would argue, well, look at the incredible TV ratings we got for the Women's World Cup. And look at the millions of people that tuned in to watch those games and watch the final. My argument is that they're not tuning in because it's Fox, but they're tuning in because it's a big football match, and they will watch it and enjoy it. But it's not a reflection of Fox's coverage. It's just that if it's a Champions League final, people want to tune in and find out, okay, whoever has the rights to it, they'll tune in and watch that game. And I think sometimes Fox has kind of looked at those big numbers that they have got for the Women's World Cup, and to us, you and me, Kartik, very lucky that they got the US in the final, and of course the US went on to win it. But I think it does color their perception, distort their perception, where they think, okay, wow, whatever we're doing, let's do more of that because it's working.
And I have to be honest with you, during the Women's World Cup, I was switching the channel after the games to ESPN, and they would have an ESPN FC special, Julie Foudy, Kate McGrath. We'll talk about both of them later because of Tony DeCicio's passing, obviously, this week. Tragic news here from the States. But I was getting better analysis on ESPN of the Women's World Cup, quite honestly.
Yeah.
So let's move on to Confederations Cup on Fox and on Telemundo. The Russia-New Zealand game I watched on Telemundo. That was the opener of the tournament. Andres Cantor, Manuel Sol, I thought they were very, very good. Cantor, I mean, he follows football like few others in the media in the United States. I mean, he had a lot of knowledge of the New Zealand team and of guys plying their trade in the English Championship, et cetera, and as well as Russia, who's the host country. You'd expect him to bone up on Russia. Manuel Sol made some very, very poignant points. It's good to watch. It's improving my Spanish. I then after that had to go broadcast a game in NPSL, Miami Fusion and Boca Raton FC. So I didn't really I had to cut out for the post-game coverage. Mexico-Portugal the next day, I watched completely on Telemundo. The coverage was excellent. They had a three-man booth. Cantor and Sol were joined by Carlos Hermosillo. Their studio coverage began about an hour and a half before the game. They had a really extensive post-game set, and they did a good job for that game. Obviously, Cantor's goal call of the equalizer for Mexico in stoppage time, second half stoppage time, has gone viral. A thing I noticed is that when Fox the next day during their broadcast played the highlights of that game, you could hear that goal call bleeding through. So I think they may have been taking clips from Telemundo, honestly. So the next day,
wait, Kartik. So because I watched this match too. So let me just chime in with my feedback on this one. So I agree with you with the Andres Cantor goal call. I mean, it was just stupendous. I mean, watching that and seeing, a great game and Mexico coming back to equalize. But Cantor, it was kind of just fantastic to listen to that. I did watch FS1 for portions of the game, and I must say that listening to the commentary by Kobe Jones and Navarro, Jorge Navarro, it was awful. It was really, really bad. And Kobe Jones was and is one of my favorite all-time US players. Just a player I respect and just gave so much to the US national team. But from a co-commentary point of view, just awful. Very, very basic commentary. At one point in the game, I think it was Navarro asked Kobe, so what does Portugal or Mexico need to do better to get back into this game? And Kobe's response was, they need to gain more possession and play better. And that's something that's such a basic level of analysis. That's something that any layperson or anyone that's new to soccer could look at any game
And actually, I think in much of that game, Mexico was controlling possession, by the way.
Right, exactly. And to me, it's such a basic level of analysis that, yes, that's true, but that doesn't heighten or add to, as a color commentator, you need to kind of be raising the bar and looking at more than just that. And yes, it was true, but it could have been so much more. Navarro was, I like his goal call was fantastic. Other than that, I wasn't impressed at all. So Spanish is his first language, English is his second language, and at times just very, very conversational, very, very just talking as the game's going on, and I'm trying to concentrate on the game.
But Chris, we had this issue during the 2013 Confederations Cup with ESPN and Fernando Palomo calling games, right?
Yeah,
that was a similar thing, calling Mexico games specifically, and them using Ian Darke and whoever he was paired with, Taylor Twellman or Steve McManaman. I can't recall who it was for that tournament, but on Spain games and on games that didn't involve Italy, I think was in that tournament as well, didn't involve Mexico, they were using Darke or their typical team. It's Adrian Healy, whoever else, Derek Ray, but they used Palomo specifically for the Mexico games in 2013, and I think it had the same kind of effect. The difference being, if I remember correctly, was he paired with Alejandro Moreno, who of course is very analytical and very good in English, and obviously does a show every night in English on ESPN FC. Yeah. So maybe that was definitely better than Kobe Jones.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think with Navarro, Navarro, which was a kind of the two of them together, it was bad. It was Kobe Jones wasn't good at all. Neither was Navarro. Putting the two together, Navarro's commentary just seemed like more of a radio commentary, because he was describing basic things that were happening on the pitch, like so and so. I don't know, Hector Moreno stops the ball. Okay, well, we can see that. We're watching the same broadcast that you're watching, but let's add some color to this. Kind of mix it up a bit. But yeah, just very, very not impressed with that. I was able to watch ITV at the same time, so I was switching back and forth, and Telemundo, so I was kind of watching all three. ITV, it was interesting to watch. They had Mark Pugach, who is the host of the show, Danny Higginbotham on the co-commentary, Clive Tilsley for the main commentary, and then the halftime analysis by Jimmy Floyd for Hasselbank and Lee Dixon. Lee Dixon, of course, from NBC fame. And the analysis was good. They had a halftime. They had a kind of a segment on the video assistant referee, which we'll get into a little bit later. But they analysed the disallowed goal from Pepe and kind of looked closer at that in terms of whether that was a correct decision or not. The other interesting thing is when they came back from break, they came back just right before the halftime kickoff, and this is something I haven't seen in a while. But they had the cameras were in the players' tunnel for the second half, and I was watching FS1 at the same time on my laptop, and they kind of came back maybe a minute or two later and just had the players kind of walking onto the pitch. So you had about an extra minute or two of halftime analysis as the players entering the pitch from Hasselbank, which was a little bit of a difference, but I enjoyed that. But yeah, overall, before I go on, Kartik, anything more to add about this game? Because I do want to mention, talk about Ian Wright for a second also.
Yeah, I want to mention that same day Cameroon-Chile was bumped to FS2, and I think that's a concern a lot of fans are going to have. There was a NASCAR event going on, and the U.S. Open, which contractually they have to show on Fox over the air. That's completely understandable. And FS1 had the NASCAR race, and I think they were contractually obligated to show that on FS1. So that's worth noting for the future. It will be the only time they have that conflict. Let's say it happens during the World Cup next year. Will be that one time slot on a Sunday afternoon, which would probably be the first or second weekend of the tournament, maybe the first, like it is for the Confederations Cup. But it's just worth noting that they don't have the bandwidth that one weekend because they have U.S. Open coverage, which is, as I said, they don't cover golf. Mm-hmm. They have the USGA deal, so they have one tournament a year. Or they show the U.S. Amateur and things that are less, that don't necessarily have to be on Fox over the air. But for golf, people are accustomed to network coverage, particularly for majors. So they have to show that on Fox. There's no way of saying and buts about that. And you can't show 3 hours on Fox and 3 hours on FS1. That has to be, the entire afternoon block has to be taken up on Fox over the air. next summer, we do have a World Cup. We've already heard from Fox that there will be a record number of games on Fox over the air. They will have much more accessible coverage, it's implied, than ESPN and ABC did. This is a bit of a red flag, but again, it's just one weekend. It's one time slot. I think once you get past the U.S. Open, they're probably wide open on Fox over the air.
Yeah, the issue really here is FS2 as far as accessibility, and there's still a lot of people in the US that don't have FS2. Mostly,
right. FS2 is not ESPN2. It's not even ESPNU in terms of or ESPN News in terms of numbers and accessibility.
Right, distribution exactly. And FS2, if you're a Comcast subscriber, chances are you don't have it, except in some places. Some Comcasts do have FS2. But luckily, I guess Cameroon against Chile, that's a pretty big game. But if it was, I don't know, Mexico against Portugal, people would have been screaming and shouting a lot louder, I'm sure. So one more thing to add about that Mexico game against Portugal is I didn't catch a lot of the pre-match or halftime or post-match analysis from Fox, but I did catch halftime, and that was with Ian Wright in the studio there with alongside Alexi Lalas and Rob Stone. And the one thing I thought that Ian Wright, he looked very laid back. He was it was strange to watch because on the Fox studio set, whether it's Champions League or FA Cup or MLS, they're very, it looks very professional. And Ian Wright had like a really short shirt. It was either too short or too tight. And he was like maybe a couple of feet back from the actual desk, leaning back, just very relaxed. And it was a different vibe than what you usually used to see in body language wise. But that apart, if you just listen to his analysis, I thought he was spot on. He had some good things to add to the conversation. But definitely a different dynamic there in that studio setup.
Holiday in LA for them, for Ian Wright, no doubt. So Australia, Germany was the next day. I switched back and forth between Telemundo and Fox for this one. John Strong is always top drawer, really good. He carries Stu Holden a bit, I think. I think Holden makes good points. It's just that his voice and his cadence isn't quite there. That's maybe something that comes with time, or we just get used to it. Cantor and Solik and had the call for Telemundo. They were excellent. I thought the Fox studio was very weak at halftime with Wright, Friedrich, and Alexi Lalas. But then post game, I thought they were really good. I would say Ian Wright was really good, and Alexi Lalas was really good. If Friedrich is becoming a bit of a throwaway, and Fox's efforts to integrate Germans on these telecasts are kind of falling flat, because it's the same thing with both Armateus. When it's been he, Kate Abdo, and Eric Winalda, he's just given very I don't think it's been particularly good. Waldo, as usual, has been very good. They're, by the way, in St. Petersburg. They're on location. Hiddink has come in when Germany is not playing. So the other days, Hiddink has been there, and I think has been much stronger and given stronger points. Hiddink, as a manager, we know, and I used to say this when we used to analyze games, that Hiddink would get a pass a lot of times from the English language media because he spoke English so well and was so engaging in English, and I thought was overrated as a manager in many of his stints, including Russia and Australia. I think he did kind of the bare minimum with them. South Korea, he was outstanding, no doubt about it. But I felt like he was always very engaging in English and could storytell in English in a way that charmed the media. We're seeing that again on Fox's broadcasts. He's very good. He's very engaging. I want to bring up this new tool Fox has, because I do think that this is great. This is a good innovation. This is something I'm looking forward to seeing used next year by them. Rob Stone walked us through it after the Australia-Germany game. It is called Fox View, and it's a metric or some sort of tool that is going to create a metric to track bypass defenders by attacking players, which is an important statistic that is not accounted for in the sport. The stats we get are things like shots on target, possession. I don't want to say they're largely meaningless, because they're not, but they don't necessarily tell you the story of a match. This might help, not on its own, but might help enhance that storytelling based on the statistics that are already being kept. So Rob Stone walked us through the set where they're going to be implementing that. I think they had kept some numbers from that Germany Australia game, but it seemed like it was a more World Cup oriented project, and kudos to Fox for that. That's something that I think will enhance our viewing experience and might even shift some people back from Telemundo to Fox if they're able to get that system up and running.
So Kartik, so I didn't see this. So it analyzes how effective an attacker is against the defense, not just based on shots on goal, but based on other, whether it's dribbling or possession, or how does it work exactly?
Yeah, it's going to be based on dribbling and possession, and bypassing, just kind of the bypassing of defenders.
Okay. Yeah, so that could be interesting. I have to keep an eye out for that when I get back to the States next week.
Now, I haven't actually seen the metric implemented yet, and how and how you compare the teams and what necessarily they do. But Rob Stone introduced it on air, and it seems very, very promising. And one other thing I should mention, and I guess I don't. Maybe we'll save this for the VAR segment, but it's been very useful that Fox has Dr. Joe Matchnick in studio during this implementation phase of VAR. He's been almost the most valuable player, if you want to call him that, the man of the match for Fox. Alongside, I'll just jump ahead and finish my viewing now. I think Ali Wagner has been fantastic. I would love to see her given the shot to be paired with John Strong and make that the top team based on the analysis she's given both here and on Lifetime with NWSL and the back Women's World Cup. I'm not quite sure she fits the role of on that show with Fiore and Lawless, which, by the way, I have not watched once during this tournament. I know they're doing it every night, but I have not watched it yet once. I really don't have any interest, any need to do so, based on what happened last summer with the Confederations Cup. But I think Ali Wagner makes a good partner for whoever she's paired with. Now, JP Dellacamera is one of the best in the business, and he's obviously helping to bring out the best in her, but I would love to see her paired with John Strong on the first team at some point, just to get a feel for how that team might work. And heck, Fox could break through and have our first lead female co-commentator for a World Cup. Julie Foudy was once the lead studio analyst for ESPN in a World Cup studio, or lead American studio analyst, at least, the only American in the studio then. But she would be the first co-commentator, potentially.
Cool, very cool. Yeah, it'd be great to see. And I've been hearing lots of great things too about Ali Wagner. We have an article actually on the homepage of worldsoccertalk.com that goes into more detail and says why we believe that she should be calling the World Cup games as a co-commentator with the broadcasting team next summer. Another game I watched this week was Mexico against New Zealand. This one I watched mostly on ITV. Pre-match, they had it was hosted again by Mark Pugac, and they had the analysts in the studio were Glenn Hoddle and Matthew Upson. And that Matthew Upson I haven't heard of in quite some time, and I thought he did a fantastic job providing his analysis. Part of the segment that they discussed, they focused on, was a discussion of the new proposed rule changes or recommendations to the game of sport of football, soccer. That was a good segment. The match itself, the commentary was from ITV was Joe Spate, who we're used to hearing on Premier League broadcasts quite often, and then Ian Dowie. And Ian Dowie in the past has been pretty average, I would say, as far as co-commentary, but I thought he did pretty well here. He's improved a lot, come a long way since when he first started out co-commentating a few years ago. On the FS1 broadcast, it was Navarro and Kobe Jones again. Same feedback as for the Mexico-Portugal game, very conversational, not a lot of focus on the game itself. And when there was focus on the game itself, it was just really kind of just basic level of analysis and commentary. And not much focus on the game itself. And last but not least, another great goal call, this time by Navarro once again. So that he has going for him, it's definitely a different style than Andres Cantor. And it's just interesting to listen to the goal calls from Telemundo and from FS1, and then compare that to ITV, because the ITV one is very English, it's very understated, it's very, it's got some excitement in there, but the Telemundo and FS1 goal calls just blow him out of the water to a whole other extreme. So that's always interesting to compare the two there. Kartik, before we move on, any thoughts on the games that you've been watching this week?
No, that's about it. I mean, I think the most striking thing to me about the Confederations Cup, and this is the Confederations Cup. It's not the World Cup. It's not the Euro. It's not Copa America. Is I turn on ESPN FC every night, and it's transfer coverage. And of course, we've had the Ronaldo saga, which obscures everything else in the football world, right?
Yeah.
Or if it's really a saga, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? I mean, my betting money is that he just stays at Real Madrid, but that's that's me.
Yeah.
But every night, I didn't watch last night yet. Off my DVR, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, even while Gab Marcotti has been at the Confederations Cup and they brought him in to discuss these transfer stories, particularly Ronaldo and potentially Mbappe and Aubameyang, it's been that's been what's driving at least ESPN's coverage of the sport while the Confederations Cup is going on. And I think that reminds us that this very much is a second-tier tournament and just a dry run for the World Cup, as much for the broadcasters in this country, Telemundo and Fox over where you are right now, ITV and BBC, although I think it's just ITV showing this tournament, correct?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, but it's as much a dry run for them and for the teams involved, et cetera, as it is a serious footballing competition. But there's still been some good football, and a lot to digest, and a lot to digest in terms of video assistant referee, which we will get to shortly. Yeah,
definitely. And for the dry runs, I mean, ITV looks pretty solid. FS1, I've seen basically spotty levels of coverage here and there. I have not been impressed thus far. And Telemundo, I haven't had a chance to watch much of the shoulder programming or the actual coverage of the games, but the game calls themselves, especially with Andres Cantor, have been top drawer.
Yeah, one thing about Fox, I have to get this in. Sorry, I have to complain, is that even though they've sent him to Russia, Eric Winalda is not being utilized enough. That's my that's my opinion. And if I don't know if there's a reason for it, but I seem to have this complaint a lot about Fox's utilization of Waldo specifically. And if that doesn't change for the World Cup, I think there are going to be a lot of unhappy people. I think the viewer that Fox is not able to engage with because of the way they present their coverage and the type of, let's say, biases some of their other commentators have. The people who complain often about Fox, a lot of that is negated if Winalda has a more prominent role, because I think he is much more in touch with those people who are critics of the U.S. soccer system.
Yeah.
The style of presentation of soccer in the United States, et cetera. And I also think his analysis is probably more sound than most of the people they have. I think it's something they might want to think about going into next summer.
Yeah, to me, Winalda's tuned in with soccer fans. He's on the same level as many of us listeners. Again, a lot of people hate him, a lot of people love him, but I think he's tuned into that. Lallis is tuned into what Garber wants or what Garber says, and MLS headquarters. And to me, is very much removed from the average soccer fans about what average soccer fans think. And Winalda, especially from the coaching perspective and having played the game at the highest level, can read games extremely well. Very similar to Taylor Twellman, a different style, but that level. And when you say that Winalda's not being used enough in the Confederations Cup, Kartik, do you mean in terms of airtime or just the types of questions they're asking him?
No, airtime. I think the questions that are being asked of him are better because it's Kate Abdo as opposed to Rob Stone. Mm-hmm. Although I have to say, Rob Stone, I think has been pretty good during this tournament. He's brought out a very good analysis out of Ian Wright with the questions asked, and I think just Ian Wright, he's a pro at this and is good. And we've seen Ian Wright on any number of things right here in the States, including documentaries that Gary Lineker's done for NBC. And Lallis has upped his game at times. I mean, again, Lallis is very hit or miss, Chris. I mean, I'll watch him one afternoon and he will say nothing of value and give cliches and seem completely disinterested in the match he's forced to cover. Maybe his mind is on MLS or something else. Then I'll watch him the next day and he'll be in tune. He'll be making poignant commentaries, comments about the action, and he will be giving you some tactical analysis. So I think Lallis is just very inconsistent. I mean, people who don't like him tend to obsess on those bad days, and people who do like him tend to obsess on those good days. I come down in between because I see it both, and it varies from match to match, really.
Yeah. And out of all of the talent at Fox, he's the one that's getting paid the most amount of money. So you would expect that consistency level to be at a high bar at all times. But there's I feel the same way too. Oftentimes,
there's some games he's just not interested in.
Yeah,
I mean, he's not interested in a Cameroon game or a game like that. But when Germany's playing, he's interested. I mean, that's just, and I think maybe that's human nature, right? That's the way we probably all are.
Exactly. All right, so let me give a shout out to our sponsor, SeatGeek. Buying tickets to sports and concerts can be complicated, but there is a better, simpler way to buy, and that's with SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the smartest, easiest way to get tickets to live events, and with SeatGeek's seamless mobile experience, you can buy and sell tickets in just 2 taps. SeatGeek helps you find the best seats at the best prices, fully guaranteed. There's nothing quite like seeing your favorite team or musician in person, and SeatGeek will get you closer to the action for a great value. Now, I have the SeatGeek app on my phone, and I've been using it for the last few months to hunt for tickets for Swansea City's games that they're playing this summer in July against Philadelphia, North Carolina, and Richmond Kickers. And it's really easy to use. You just download the app, and within a few seconds, you can instantly find tickets for any games or any competitions that you're looking for. Now, SeatGeek is designed to make your ticket buying experience easier than ever. It saves you time and money by searching multiple ticket sites to compare prices and find amazing deals. And to get the most bang for your buck, SeatGeek grades every ticket based on value to help you immediately identify the best seats that fit your budget. Plus, every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets on SeatGeek with confidence. Now, make SeatGeek your go-to app for finding the best deals on every type of ticket, from sports and concerts to comedy and theatre. Best of all, my listeners get $20 off their first SeatGeek purchase. Just download the SeatGeek app and enter promo code WSTPOD today. That's promo code WSTPOD for $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Now, Kartik, let's move on to TV streaming news, and to start off with, some sad news from the world of U.S. soccer.
Yeah, Tony DeCiccio passed away Monday night. Wasn't announced till Tuesday. A really tragic event. I was stunned. When I got the press release, I reread it to make sure I wasn't misreading. And that was how
me too.
Stunning it was. I want to say I saw him recently on either ESPN or Lifetime or Fox or someplace. Maybe I didn't during a national team game. He's obviously worked as a commentator for both ESPN and Fox, coached the U.S. women's team to that 1999 Women's World Cup triumph. There were great eulogies given for him by Julie Foudy and Kate McGrath on ESPN FC, on the ESPN FC program. Real stunner, had an important impact on the entire soccer landscape in the United States, particularly the women's game. So he's passed away at 68. A real tragedy.
Yeah, and that was something that I think we talked about maybe a couple of months ago, and he did a broadcast. I think it was on Fox, but it was it was him and I forgot the other. It might have been Kate McGrath, but the two of them started off the broadcast, and within the first 3 or 4 minutes, you could tell that he really understood the game, and not only did he understand the game, but was really able to communicate it in a really intelligent manner. And the type of person that you'd always want to listen to, somebody that had a ton of knowledge. But was really excited and passionate about the game. And of course, he worked as a co-commentator for many years for ESPN and Fox Sports, and very much a familiar face that you would see on U.S. women's national team broadcasts, and definitely somebody that will be definitely missed. And yeah, it's. I was shocked too, Kartik, when I got the press release, and I had to reread it a couple of times too to make sure that was actually what had happened, just because I was so surprised, so shocked, and it's definitely going to be a great loss for U.S. soccer and soccer around the world, really. Just definitely a shining figure there. Now, on to other news. Fubo TV has upgraded their cloud DVR functionality to include 10 DVR slots. So previously, I think the most number of DVR recordings you could have there were 3. It's now 3. Yeah, it's now 10, and actually the number of days that you can keep those recordings is for 10 days too. So that's increased also. So definitely opens it up to, and it's not just even.
It's a pretty big deal for me because I don't know how many times I've either used up my slots or have run out of the 3 day, have taped let's say a La Liga game on Sunday, and have intended to watch it early in the week, have not been able to, and it's gone by the time I have time Thursday or Friday.
Yeah,
it's happened to me, I would say, a half dozen times. So I didn't complain to Fubo, but I assume other people did, and I'm glad that they've done this.
Yeah, definitely fantastic news there. And then we have a new study that just came out, Kartik, this week, and if you can talk more about that.
Yeah, and I think this is really important for also MLS expansion. I mean, I just did a long 1 hour long show with Neil Morris, my colleague over at WRAL in the Raleigh-Durham area in North Carolina yesterday about MLS expansion. And I was making the point based on the point on my particular why I think certain markets are going to get to MLS and others aren't, based on Hispanic media more than even just general Nielsen rankings. And this just reinforces it. I hadn't seen the empirical data at the time, but I made this point that the new Nielsen Research Commission by Univision, Los Fanaticos, the passion and power of the Hispanic sports fan, found Hispanics consume 64% more sports than non-Hispanic counterparts. And this is the point I was making specifically about San Antonio and Sacramento as potential MLS markets. They both have lower division teams now that have applied to move up to Major League Soccer. They are large Hispanic television markets. And I made the point that the Hispanic soccer audience and obviously the sports audience in general, based on the study, are more engaged. And I believe, and Univision is as important a media partner now for Major League Soccer as ESPN and Fox are in many ways. I believe MLS is going to look at the Hispanic demographics of markets in making most of their expansion determinations, and this just kind of reinforces that.
Yeah, that's a huge number when you think about it. 64% Hispanics consume 64% more sports than non-Hispanic counterparts, and to me that's great news for soccer in this country too, because oftentimes I hear people say, well, soccer isn't big in the US, or soccer is just still a minor sport. And this goes to show that, especially with the growing Hispanic demographic in the United States, as that gets bigger, to me, soccer becomes more and more popular. So yeah, fantastic news for soccer, and interesting study. So the last piece of news for this week is that we mentioned Fubo just a few minutes ago. Now, Fubo has announced that in the coming weeks, they're going to be adding several new channels to the Fubo Premier package, and those include CBS, the CBS Sports Network, the CW, Pop, and CBSN, which I believe is the news channel. But all in all, it'll bring in line about more than 60 channels to Fubo Premier. So everything from CBS to NBC to Fox to beIN Sports, beIN Sports Connect, and everything else. So good news for people that are into CBS. Not a lot of soccer on CBS, Kartik, but there should be some good additions there, especially with the NFL.
Yeah, and we never know what's going to happen in terms of soccer rights going forward. I think that growing Hispanic demographic you talk about is going to tempt CBS potentially to make some bids on soccer leagues going forward. At least that's my hope. Yeah,
you would think so. I mean, just think about it. NBC 5 years ago, it was invisible. I mean, most people didn't watch NBC for soccer because there was hardly any soccer, if any soccer, on NBC. So here's an opportunity here for CBS perhaps in the near future to...
Right. I mean, I remember getting annoyed during the men's and women's Olympic tournaments in 2008, the Beijing Olympics, saying, gosh, these guys are covering soccer. They know nothing about the sport. I think if I remember correctly, they did bring in JP to call some games, which relieved me because he's one of the best American voices. But they didn't have any understanding of how to broadcast the games. Then Comcast acquires NBC Universal a year or two later, and they make a commitment to both Major League Soccer and the Premier League, and obviously continued to broadcast the Premier League, and have brought the Premier League into a mainstream in this country. So you don't know what's going to happen with these larger TV networks. Trust me, they're all seeing the ratings that we're going to talk about in a minute for Telemundo and Univision and Fox and ESPN and NBC, and maybe making decisions, just like Turner Sports did on UEFA Champions League. That came out of nowhere. When you obviously said that they were bidding on this show. I thought, wow, I think they might get it because if they're bidding for a reason. Mm-hmm. That might happen with CBS down the road.
Okay, well, speaking of TV ratings, let's move on to that segment. And some big numbers came out this past week, most of them for the Confederations Cup. Some of the numbers, just to throw out there, Kartik, the Portugal against Mexico game on Telemundo, that had 2.4 million viewers on that one. That game on FS1 had 485,000 viewers. That game was on a Sunday from 11 Eastern to 1 p.m. Eastern. And some of the other numbers too, the Mexico against New Zealand game, that one on Telemundo had 1.7 million people tuning in for that. And some other big numbers too, 1.3 million for Cameroon against Chile on Telemundo. So all in all, some big numbers. There's 3 games right there that had over 1 million viewers on Telemundo. So far, Telemundo's doing quite well on the ratings front.
Yeah. How do you explain? And this is a concern for Fox. Let's take the Russia-New Zealand number in isolation because that's doesn't involve a Latin American team. The number on Telemundo was about twice the number, or more than twice the number on FS1. Is that a concern for next year if you're Fox, or is that just an isolated game? Obviously, Telemundo has built up the Confederations Cup to a greater extent, and they showed the Russia-New Zealand game was over the air. Actually, all these games have been over the air on Telemundo.
Yeah, I would be concerned. I mean. Well, we just talked about the ratings, the study that showed that Hispanics consume more sports than non-Hispanics in the US. So the Hispanic audience is probably more likely to watch soccer matches on Telemundo, even if it's Russia against New Zealand, where on both teams there's really no players of note of Hispanic descent or origin. And it's twice as many as FS1, but at the same time too, for FS1, they're probably in the same boat too, where there's really no Russians or New Zealanders of American context or relation there. I think it's more that. I think it's just more that audience is just more soccer inclined.
How about Germany, Australia? Because that's different. There is obviously a following for Germany in the United States, and there are people who know a lot of Australian players because they play in the Premier League or play in England. So maybe not as much as in the past, when Viduka and Kuhl were around. Again, more than twice the number on Telemundo for that one. That's got to be of concern.
Yeah. Well, so throw out everything I just said a minute ago, because actually, Kartik, you're right, because the viewing number for the Telemundo was more than double the number for FS1, and you would think Germany against Australia, that would be probably more of a non-Hispanic viewer might be interested in watching it on FS1 in English. So in looking at that, especially with Germany and with the Bundesliga on Fox, you would think that those numbers would be greater, but they're not. So maybe there's some issues that FS1 has where they're so rah-rah USA, whereas when it's not USA, they're having issues trying to bring in viewers to there. And maybe there's a lot of gringos or non-Hispanics switching over to Telemundo and watching the coverage over there instead of on Fox.
Yeah, I think that this is something we'll continue to monitor going forward, but this is a topic we keep bringing up, and a lot of people don't want to hear about the possibility that English language dominant viewers would watch international games on Telemundo or Univision if the alternative was Fox, and we're seeing that play out. I mean, the Russia-New Zealand numbers and the Australia-Germany numbers tell me something. Let's see if it changes as the tournament wears on or if that's part of a trend.
Yep. So let's move on to listener mailbag. First one up is Anthony Bello through email, and he says, I have a couple of questions on the next Premier League television deal. If they are not allowing the 3 p.m. games, local time in the UK, to be on television because of Match of the Day, that's up there with NBC embargoing Olympic coverage for prime time. How does Match of the Day do in the ratings, and how many people in Britain have access to Sky and BT? So let me just pause his email there for a second. So Match of the Day in the ratings, I don't have the ratings numbers in front of me, but Match of the Day is in the UK, it's an institution. It's most, if not all, soccer fans are watching that program to catch up on all the games for the day, and most of them are not televised. So that's their main way to see what happens, not just the goal highlights, but also the analysis. So the Alan Shearers of the world and the Gary Linekers, etc. So ratings-wise, I'm not sure the actual numbers, but that would be one of the top shows for football, soccer in the UK by no question about it. How many people in Britain have access to Sky and BT? It depends. If you're a sports fan or a soccer fan, more than likely you're going to have access to Sky and BT. Now, all my relatives I'm staying with, none of them are football fans. None of them have Sky. None of them have BT. So they're just getting your kind of basic cable package, essentially. But if you're a soccer fan, especially, or a sports fan in the UK, most of them would have Sky and BT, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to watch all these Premier League matches. Anthony Bello goes on. He says, the other question I have is if every match there was broadcast, how big would the demand be for a Crystal Palace against Swansea 3 p.m. match? And would there be a demand for 3 p.m. matches in the Championship, League One and League Two? Well, so the 3 p.m. local time on a Saturday, that's the 10 a.m. Eastern time kickoff. I don't think that it's going to happen. It's kind of, I think a lot of people would like it to happen so they can watch their favorite team play away. Maybe it's not far from. Maybe it's too far for them to actually travel to that game and have that game be away and watch it that way. I don't see that ever changing. At least not probably in the next 10 years. So I think it's a non-starter for me. And then lastly, he says, what does he say? What I would do is sell the 3 p.m. matches like any other package to Sky and BT. And then they would sell it where you could buy a single game or a team season or every game in a season. So I think he's looking at that almost like with the iFollow, which is
Football League.
Yeah, with the Football League package where you can subscribe to a package where you can subscribe to, say, Newcastle United get promoted to the Premier League, and I want to watch every single Newcastle United game, no matter what the kickoff time is. But I still think that the UK authorities and the leagues would clamp down on that and try to discourage any 3 p.m. UK time kickoff games from happening, just because that would have a big impact, a negative impact on the attendances throughout the UK.
Yeah.
Next up is Armando Diaz, and he says, at first glance, I was disappointed by the television numbers for the Premier League. However, there was an aspect which I did not hear mentioned during the podcast. If I missed it, I apologise, but I do not remember listening to the factor of police at many English League games. Here in the States, we expect rivalry games to be played in prime time to generate maximum potential viewing audiences. In England, this is not the case. The audience should be made aware that police can and often exercise their abilities to force kickoff times to start earlier. Case in point, Aston Villa fans invading the pitch after defeating West Brom to advance to the semi-final of the FA Cup back in 2015. Authorities believe supporters had too much time to ply themselves with drink prior to the match, and for this reason I do not think we will see Merseyside, Manchester or North London derbies contested at 6 p.m. Local time on a Sunday, for example, which is kind of the theory or the idea I put out there on last week's podcast. Kartik, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think that's a great point by Armando. I have noticed that through the years with the Manchester derby in particular, the start time is being fixed to the earliest possible start time on a Sunday morning, or the early kickoff at times on the Saturday morning, the 12:45 p.m. Or 12:30 standard British Standard Time kickoff, and we've seen it in particular. Now we don't have to worry about it next year because Sunderland's been relegated. But with the Sunderland Newcastle, the Tyne Wear derby, where they will kick that game off as early as possible for that reason, and of course that would be a very attractive television game. So this point is well taken. I'm not sure as much about the London derbies. I'd have to think about that, but definitely the Manchester derby, the preference has been to kick that game off earlier rather than later. And same thing with the Merseyside derby, the Everton-Liverpool game. You don't see that in the 5:30 p.m. kickoff or on a Saturday, or the 4 p.m. kickoff on a Sunday ever for that reason. So very good point, Armando. I wish we had thought of that ourselves last week.
Yeah. Next up is Clayton Davis, and he sent in an email. He says, interesting that you bring up the topic of weather delays for DC United games. While I agree that weather delays for games in the summer is fairly common, snow delays are also something to worry about up here. Not to mention that in recent years, the temperatures in the winter have gotten pretty cold from time to time. So that goes back to what we were saying about.
I agree with that. I agree with that, but again, I think this is a one-sided debate for the most part. I mean, again, when I had this MLS expansion conversation yesterday with Neil Morris on WRAL up in the Raleigh-Durham area, this came up how Phoenix, Raleigh-Durham, Tampa, St. Pete, San Antonio, all these markets that are seeking to get into MLS in warmer weather areas and areas with lots of thunderstorms are impacted by the MLS calendar in a way that I'm not sure the teams in the Northeast would be impacted more. Now, I agree with Clayton. There probably will be weather delays if you play through the winter. And my proposal always has had a 6 to 8 week winter break, like Germany has. But and that affects television, right? And television is supposed to be the driver of this. But I'm not sure you'll have more delays. That's the thing. You will have delays. I'm not denying that. Will you have more delays? Will you have more dangerous weather conditions for fans to travel in and players to play in than you would if you played on a different calendar? I'm not sure you would.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I think there is a way to structure the calendar to such a way that it would work better for most teams and not be the kind of the craziness that we get now, where in the summer we got all these thunderstorms, and then we still got snow in March in some places. But yeah, that's a whole other topic for a whole other day. And last but not least, we have a comment through Facebook, and this is from Raymond Orozco, and I believe he's alluding to Fox's Confederations Cup coverage thus far. And he says, "Can Fox please bring back Bobby McMahon?" Kartik, what do you think about that one?
That's a no-brainer to me.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I'm not sure Bobby McMahon fits with the tenor of Fox's coverage. But yeah, of course, I would bring him back in a heartbeat. And the stuff he writes, if you check out his work on Forbes, which is kind of random when he writes an article about football finance or just kind of the business of football, it's usually spot on. And I think in terms of the kind of information and analysis he provides there, it's probably better than just about anyone who writes about that subject, other than maybe the Swiss Ramble.
Yeah, and it's probably better than what you would hear from him on television, because he wouldn't be given that amount of time to kind of go into detail about, whether it's El Clasico and the finances behind what makes that such a revenue-generating game, just as one example. But yeah, I would encourage everyone listening, if you are a fan of Bobby McMahon, or even if you're not, is just Google Forbes Bobby McMahon, and you'll see his column that gets updated every so often. So the last segment of the show, Kartik, is our featured topic of the week. And this one is one that I think a lot of people have been talking about, and that's the impact of the video assistant referee. And in this case, for this show, on the TV viewing experience. Now, Kartik, like I said earlier in the show, I haven't watched a ton of Confederation Cup games. I have watched a few, but so far I'm not impressed. And so far, yes, it's a trial. But I think we have to be careful what we ask for, because this has been for years, probably decades at this point. People are saying, okay, video technology, we need it in the game. Okay, that's easy to say, but it's hard to do. And I think what we've seen thus far, Kartik, has been that there's still a lot of kinks to work out, and there's still a lot of question marks about how to do this in such a way where it's going to be not just a great experience for the TV viewer, but it's also going to make sense as far as the flow of the game in soccer without slowing it down too much. But what are your initial thoughts about video assistant referees?
It's been horrible. Thankfully, Dr. Joe has been in the Fox studio to kind of explain, or on the phone or wherever they have him, to kind of explain what's going on, because otherwise it would be dead air. I think the commentators are confused through no fault of their own. The commentators calling the matches, whether on Telemundo or on Fox or ITV or in the UK. And there's really no clear timeline as to how things shake out. We saw in which game was a New Zealand-Mexico controversy at the end of the match, and a lot of confusion with the center ref and VAR. And these are some of the top referees in the world, by the way, but this is a new tool for them, and they've had to go through kind of some sort of remedial training as well. Counterattack, New Zealand down 2-1, clear kind of cynical foul to break up a promising attack. And free kick, yellow card free kick for New Zealand. And then you have VAR brought in, and there's a delay. And then the free kick is taken, but then the referee has to stop the action again, another delay. And this is all very confusing for the commentators. It's terrible for the viewer. It's reminiscent of sports in the United States, and also threatens, from a television perspective, to push the games beyond the 2-hour window. And now this is very important, because one of the most reliable and comforting things about football, I think, to the television viewer about this sport versus American football or American basketball or baseball or whatever, and hockey, is that you have a tight window. If you DVR a game, you know it's going to start at a certain time. You know it's going to end at a certain time. If you have a place to get, if you have to take your kids somewhere, you can schedule yourself within those tight windows. And television networks accordingly can schedule programming based on those windows. Everybody complains who watches American sports, why does ESPN only have a 3-hour window for college football when they know the game's going to go 4 hours because of all the replays and other stoppages. And same thing with college basketball. Soccer/football, association football, is the one sport you can still set your watch by.
Yeah, and that's
particularly from a programming perspective.
And that's one of my concerns too, especially with it being in the video assistant review, and they pause the game, and then you're watching, kind of the split screen, and you're watching the referee. My concern is that the broadcasters will start figuring out ways to put TV commercials into those time slots, which is, to me, it disrupts the flow of the game. And oftentimes, too, that instance, Kartik, that you mentioned, the Mexico-New Zealand game, to me, if you didn't have video assistant review implemented or used at all, my guess is probably the referee would have, if he saw it, I believe he saw it, would have given a straight red card for that lunge, kind of tackle from behind. That should have been a straight red. But instead of that, you had the whole confusion. You were like, okay, getting ready for the free kick, you know that they're reviewing the tape, but they continue to play, and then they stop it and then restart it. But before they restart it, they hand out 2 yellow cards. But just the flow of information, the way it's working, is really confusing. I think the referee looked confused. He was waiting for kind of the input from the booth, I guess, and then we were confused, the viewer. We don't know what's happening. And also the commentators, the broadcasters don't know what's happening either. So one thing I do like about NFL is, at least when they're mic'd up, the referee switches on his mic and explains on further review, whatever the call is. That I like better, although I have a hard job imagining that happening in soccer. So thus far, I've been really unimpressed. And in some ways, it seems that the game of soccer, at least for this trial, it's relying too much on the technology. It's relying too much on the video, on the VAR, for lack of a better term. What I do think should happen is that it should be used less frequently, and it should only be used in moments of the game where it's completely necessary, such as a penalty decision or a very close offside decision. And for the rest of the game, I think really it should be up to the referees to, use their own eyes and ears and the team of match officials there to make the right decision. Because right now it's too much stop, start, and just kind of chaos on the pitch.
Is it possible that that they're doing it this way because they're trying to sabotage the system? Because you could have very basic replays like what you're talking about, just a penalty decision or close offside calls, like the offside call at the end of the Chile-Cameroon game. That made sense. Is it possible that they're overdoing it and it's far beyond what we were promised in order to kind of turn public opinion against it? Because I've been an advocate, albeit a kind of a quiet advocate, for technology in the game, but this first week of the Confederations Cup has kind of flipped me on that.
Yeah, for me, I don't trust FIFA at all. So to me, it seems to be kind of a way to I think it's the first time that they're using it, so it is taking more time than it would. So a year from now, it'd be much faster. But I still think that FIFA is trying to figure out if there's ways to insert TV commercials or breaks into games where they could allow for TV commercials. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're thinking of it, or at least having discussions of it outside of FIFA, but maybe FIFA talking to some of the top broadcasters saying, okay, is there a way that we can include a commercial or advert in the game, and maybe take 2 minutes to make a decision. I hope that's not happening, but that's the feeling I get. And again, I don't trust FIFA, so I wouldn't be surprised if those conversations are happening. But I don't think it's a way to just do such a bad implementation that they're trying to get the public to say, we don't need video assistant referees. I think it's brand new. I mean, he even had the referee in that Mexico-New Zealand game go off to the sidelines, up to the touchline on the pitch, and look at the big massive TV screen to review the play, and then came back. So they're trying to make it work. I just think that thus far it's failing, and I don't know if to me, I think it's a good opportunity to test it out, especially in a tournament like this where there's not as much on the line. But so far, I'm not impressed. And actually, so far, say 6 months ago, I would have said that I was disappointed with the Premier League because they hadn't announced any plans to implement video assistant referees. And the Premier League, the reason why they said they weren't going to do it yet is they wanted to see how it happened, or see how it worked out for other leagues, such as Major League Soccer, such as the Bundesliga, and such as FIFA, before they implemented it. And I think at this moment in time, the Premier League made the right decision in terms of just holding off and seeing how this thing plays out before they decide whether or not to implement it and incorporate it into their league.
Yeah, so I agree with that, and I want to the last bit of judgment I'm going to withhold is based on what will happen in Major League Soccer the second half of this season. Howard Webb has come over to the United States to lead the effort and the implementation of VAR. He's already been on the ESPN FC show, Great Get the other day by Dan Thomas and Sebastian Salazar and the team there, to get him on and to discuss some poor calls or questionable calls in Major League Soccer the previous weekend, and discuss how video assistant referee would not necessarily reverse those calls, but would be implemented, be used as a tool to assist the center ref in the handling of those specific circumstances. And obviously Howard Webb is very good on television. He's one of the best referees in the world, now retired referees in the world. So his explanations were more soothing to me and more convincing to me, and really kind of explained how it was going to be used as a tool, how the judgment was going to still be made quickly with the assistance of these VARs. Then came the Confederations Cup, and the mess that it has been in the last week. So perhaps with Howard Webb leading the effort, maybe he should have been leading FIFA's effort. He would have been a logical guy, having officiated a World Cup final and a Champions League final and a Euro final. But FIFA has other ideas about that to implement it. Maybe MLS will have a tighter model, because I think also in the United States, this issue of delays and replay is a bigger issue for a lot of soccer fans, because a lot of fans of the sport in this country have been exposed to American sports and don't like what they see there, which are indefinite delays. And for broadcasters, and in this case Fox in particular, the fact that a 2-hour window then becomes a 2.5-hour window because of replays, and people just quit DVRing games because they think the game might run over, or all of those sorts of unintended consequences of things. So let's see how it goes in Major League Soccer. Early returns are not promising, but maybe the MLS implementation will be different and convince us that this has an opportunity to work at the broader level. And if it's going to work at the broader level, maybe you need to get a guy like a Howard Webb in there to help implement it based on what I assume will be a different trajectory he takes here in the United States to implement it.
I think it can work. Right now with the Confederations Cup, it's just too much. They're just relying on it too heavily. And I think if they roll it back a little bit and tighten it up in terms of communication and trying to figure out how this whole process is going to work, that it could be implemented. But I think we're still a long way off from getting anywhere close to where it's going to be to a point where it actually is going to be fair and in balance. And I think we saw that too with just that skirmish at the end of the Mexico-New Zealand game. We had almost both teams in kind of fighting right there on the pitch, and then the indecision afterwards and the amount of time it took. And at the end of the day, there was no red cards. And I thought, okay, here's a massive fight you have with players, a bad foul, some pushing, shoving, and it was just like a really poor example of how poorly VAR was in this case in terms of where it's supposed to help the referee. If anything, it seemed to hinder the referee or hurt the referee. So Kartik, where can listeners find you on the internet if they want to hit you up with questions or feedback?
You can find me at KKFLA737 on Twitter. That's the easiest place to find me. My name, Kartik Krishnaiyer, on Facebook and on Google+, and the various sites I write for, including World Soccer Talk.
Excellent. Well, thank you for listening. You can get a new episode of the World Soccer Talk podcast every Thursday or Friday. Every episode is released on SoundCloud, YouTube, Stitcher, iTunes, Audio Boom, and worldsoccertalk.com. If you like the show, share it with your friends on social media and give us a review. And Kartik, what should they do?
Enjoy your football.